So as most people know how we operate via our virtual meetings, please mute yourself throughout the meeting. Feel free to use the chat, and that is located at the bottom of your screen. If you are on video, if you've joined us via video, you'll notice that it's at the bottom, and you can type in the chat and ask questions throughout, and we will make sure that we capture those questions, and we will definitely make sure we try to address any questions that come into the chat. If you do have any technical difficulties, you're more than welcome to email us at the dcyf.communityengagement@dcyf.wa.gov, and we will be watching that email address throughout the meeting as well. This meeting is probably going to have more participants than are on right now, so please make sure if you do have a question throughout and you're unable to use the chat, raise your hand. You can try to unmute. We may have to mute you if there's a lot going on or we have a lot of background noise, but we will definitely keep track of your name and we'll unmute you when we have an opportunity to do so. And then we are taking notes and recording this today, so we will address any questions that arise throughout the meeting, whether it is today or whether it is before the next meeting, which is 2 weeks or 3 weeks away. We will do that. Welcome to those of you that have just joined, didn't hear all the protocols. We're slowly getting started so that more people can join. So just bear with my slowness today as I walk through this. And if you can do introductions in the chat, that would be beneficial. So if you could in the chat, please share your name, where you're located, whether you're a center provider, a family home provider, a public attendee, an FFN provider, sorry, I missed that, or staff. That would be great. Also in the chat, I know you may have seen Emily entered the links to the agenda and to a feedback loop document, which is from the last meeting. So any outstanding questions that we received that we were unable to answer during the meeting, we have added those to the feedback loop document for you to reference. Thank you. Welcome, everybody. Everyone's adding their information in. All right, and we are going to do a quick word cloud activity. So that link will be put in the chat here in a few minutes. If you can click on that and answer the introduction question. So what are you looking forward to most this summer? And then there is a link, Emily put the link to the Mentimeter in the chat. I see Michelle, thank you, the sun. Yeah, if you're unable to click on the link, feel free to put it into the chat. Jason, vacation. Vacation Hawaii. Good news. Outdoor ping pong, Susie. Love that. A lot of outdoor activities for sure. For those of you just joining, we're just doing quick introductions in the chat. If you can list your name, your location, and then what you represent, whether it's a childcare provider, family home provider, FFM provider, staff, public attendee, where you work, you can include that, that's fine. And then answering the question, what you are looking forward to most this summer. All right. So today, as most of you know, we're going to be walking through the communications and social media topic with the Director of Communications here at the agency, Jason Wettstein. And we did provide a survey before to kind of gather your feedback from providers so he could kind of prepare for this and come with some of your questions and concerns answered, and then just kind of address what he heard and see if there's anything else related to this topic. And then also we will transition to the topic of background checks, and that will be led by Matt Judge and Chris Parvin, and actually Carrie Ann Vincent from DCYF. Those three will be tackling the background check topic right after we have the presentation from Jason. So at this time, I'm going to turn it over to Jason if you're ready. Oh, I see you. There you are. Perfect. So welcome, Jason. And he is going to talk about the communications piece and then anything else if you have questions. Remember to please put your questions in the chat throughout. We will definitely get to them, or raise your hand. And you can do that by going to the bottom of your screen and clicking on the reactions button, and then it will say raise hand. All right, perfect. Well, Jason, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Okay, thanks, Deanna. Hey, I saw somebody put in, they're looking forward to background checks. I'm like, you all know how to live. That sounds really great. So anyway, as Deanna mentioned, I'm Jason Wettstein, Communications Director with DCYF, and I'm coming up on 11 months in this position. I work with a small and really talented team of communicators, including people working on provider communications and email and social media, news media, forums development, web content. But I wanted to mention that my office does not directly manage our website. We work really closely with a single person who does all this work, both internally and externally. So we think of her, Debbie, as an honorary member of the team and greatly respect the massive amount of work on her plate. So as Deanna mentioned, I did read the survey responses and wanted to respond to a few items listed in those. I recognize that when folks lend their opinion to an agency, it's a real gift. It's a real benefit to the agency. And so I want to thank you for providing your insights in the surveys. I mean, I personally am not a person who loves to answer surveys, right? So thank you for taking your time to care. That's demonstrated by you being here as well. So one place of focus in the responses was on website search results and whether they're understandable and whether they're orderly. And in speaking with our webmaster, I found out that we use something called Drupal. It's an industry standard search tool. And so, there are questions about ordering. So the standard ordering is by relevancy in search terms rather than by date. Date would be a relevancy factor as well, but they start with sort of the search terms and then date as another one. But the essence of what I got back from our webmaster was that she agreed that the search could definitely be improved and is planning to research what it will take to implement an upgraded search tool as a new version of Drupal comes out. I think the new version of Drupal is coming out later this year. And so she heard that message, and she can see what's meant there, right? So other items included in the survey, and these were sort of one person or one or two people making different requests and or comments about that one of them was that provider updates should be sent out weekly in terms of emails on the same day of the week, with newest items listed first, plus a monthly recap at the end. And that's sort of an agglomeration of a bunch of different responses. And so in speaking with my team, I found out that we've made a concentrated effort to aim for fewer messages. But part of the challenge is that we also heavily segment our messaging. So as some messages will apply to some people and some groups and others won't, it's very possible that this group in particular, because it's really connected, could be getting a lot more messages than the norm. So that's something to be aware of. but the point that was made in the surveys is valid, that we have to work to manage the pace and be mindful of the pace and cadence and volume of messaging. And so we are working to continue that conversation with our early learning and licensing program teams so as not to flood people, right? So, and we've made some progress regarding month-end messaging. We do a once monthly Fair Start for Kids Act newsletter, and in talking with the team, they're thinking that that might be something, that idea that we would take to other newsletters as well. So the Fair Start for Kids Act newsletter, I think Eric is on, but last he reported it had a 50% open rate. And that's actually quite good. Oftentimes marketers, if they get just 10%, or even for mass campaigns, 2% open rate, they're really as excited as can be. So the idea of sort of a wrap up is something that's definitely bears research and follow through. So we'll be looking into that too as we consider our next innovations, and as we continue the conversation with the early learning licensing program. And then I did want to ask a question of the group, back to the website. I noted a few comments on web pages not being user-friendly. I could really benefit from specifics on that, right? With specific pages, we can evaluate if there's good web writing standards being followed, or have the webmaster look into Google Analytics on specific pages. It may be that we need a close look at what is being accessed and reduce the potential for information overload again. So for our team here, is there a specific web page that I should be looking at? I'm looking at the chat, and or is it just shout it out so that I'll take some notes.
So to clarify, Jason, you just want some feedback on?
Yeah, is there any specific URL that we should be looking at, in terms of understandability, clarity, information that's missing? Merit page, okay.
And then also helpful pages that are written really well that folks find helpful, so that you have something to compare to. Okay.
Yeah.
Feel free to unmute everyone. I know I said put stuff in the chat, but feel free to unmute and provide any feedback as well, if that's easier for you to do.
And are we capturing the chat too?
Yes.
Okay, cool. Well, thank you. I see Merit page. I see DCYF training portal versus Merit. And you're going to get more feedback, Susie. Thank you. And then search does not always work when using what should be a keyword. Okay, thanks, Hillary. Yeah, well, okay. Well, like I said, our website is certainly a work in progress. It's we're working on, with regard to staffing at a pretty small resource, right, in terms of just a single person, but she did indicate interest in also doing like usability tests and sort of testing, some of the hypotheses and ideas that you brought forward in the survey to see if they apply to the entire site. So I think with this, I might just say thank you. I know you have vital work ahead of you today with regard to the background checks, and so I think I appreciate the chance to introduce myself, and thank you for this work that you're doing alongside DCYF. And unless you have additional questions, I think I'll just take this information that you provide in the chat as extra information and bring it back to our webmaster. So.
Perfect. Well, thank you, Jason. And go ahead. Sorry.
Oh, hey, Deanna, this is Julie. I'm I'm on my phone. I can't see the chat, but I'm wondering if it's in there. I said in the last meeting it would be really helpful if they had links on Merit and in the WA Compass that led to each other. I think for new providers, there's a lot of different things and places they have to go to access different things. and they should all link to each other, even if they're not all on the same system. They could still provide a link on, here is a link to get to Wa Compass, and you'll need to go there because, that kind of thing.
Cool. Yeah, I mean, that seems like just a clarity and a quick change, frankly. So yeah, that kind of thing is really helpful.
Yes, this is Gloria Vasquez. I support most new providers to do the process their applications, to submit the applications. And sometimes it's hard for them when they receive the approval and have the revision, they have the license in their hands. But in the website, it's still pending. Or maybe in the website is approved, but when somebody called to request them for services and the working connections appear, that there's not appear any license in there is pending. When we're trying to help them to register the facility, we cannot do that process because something is going on in the system. Last 3 months, the last 2-3 months, we have that big challenge with a lot of new providers, and they have families waiting, but we didn't know to which department we going to call because we told the licensors, they say, no, we don't have nothing to do. That is approved. We send an emails to Mary, to facility side, but we don't have the specific person who is going to help us to fix that problem. And some of them took weeks. Another took like 2-3 weeks to waiting, and this is a lot of stress. That will be so nice, like between departments going to be communication with each other and make more easy for new providers. And sometimes we have to advocate for them. I have to contact the licensor, or I have to investigate and help them because they are frustrated already with the revision and they trying to give up because it's that kind of challenges. And these providers are from the Imagine Institute groups. But I can imagine for a new providers who are not in that program, how many struggles they have. I think I agree with another professional mentioned, have links, have connection, this connected with that, with another person. And also when a family is requesting these services and is approved, the provider didn't receive an email. And the family is calling them and say, oh, they told me I approve. They told me I'm ready to bring my kids. But if the provider don't have the communication, like was assigned to her daycare, she cannot receive that. And they have to wait for the letter and the mail. And what we find out, like we have to call to working connections and verify, and they have our emails. And the thing is, why between departments don't send or share the emails, because it's easy. It's easy, like they open our profile, they can see our emails, but they don't do that. They don't send the communication by email until the provider days later call and update the email. It's the same email, but it will be too easy. They can pass the information to the another departments and save a little step for us or for new providers. Now, as we know how that works between with the struggles, but for new providers, that is really hard. And sometimes they lose the families because family complain the provider don't want to accept the kids. But if they don't have the letter, or they accept the kids, but later the CYF don't go to do retro days because she was not approved while she was taking care of the kids. If she was approved, she don't have the information. I think that's going to be easy if they send an email right away, but don't expect the provider to call working connections, because the CYF and licensing has the email ready in there. Only pass the information through them, and that saves a lot of confusion for new providers. And another thing I find out, and merit, when we don't going to register facility size, I'm going to use one example, okay? This provider, her name was Maria Graciela Quiroz. When we try to facilitate to register the facility, they come an error message say that is not your correct name that you're using in this site. She was under Quiroz Maria Graciela, and we trying to connect with the licensor, with Mary to help her, and nothing were happening. The only I can think, like the names were bad words, like in the start to put in Quiroz Graciela Maria, they put Quiroz Maria Graciela, and that was the mistake. But Maria Graciela always use like Graciela, the middle name, and is making like when provider has two names or two last name is the mistake. Last year was Veronica Mora Sanchez, the same problem. She was written and there like Sanchez Mora Veronica. They mix the names. And I think that is the errors they come in there, and providers trying to follow all the rules and recommendations, but it's nothing on their side. Their side is more over than other, the DCYF department side. But we need to have a specific department who is in charge to fix that or to solve that, because we would keep contacting one department, another department. They say, I don't know, and here is okay, and here shows the same. I don't know what is the problem. So we need to fix a little those steps, like provoke a lot of chaos for providers, for families.
Can I interrupt for just a minute?
Yes.
I wonder, I'm hoping that you're putting all of this like in the chat or something. I'm missing a lot of what you're saying.
Mm-hmm.
And I just wonder if it would be something that they could get back to us on if you put it in writing so we know what you're suggesting.
Yes, I will do that. I will do that. But yes, I'm there who receive those kind of struggles from new providers because I've been working with them.
And what I'm hearing,
Yeah.
Gloria, is that you have had, there's been some quality control aspects with, you'll provide, a letter will be provided in writing, but then it won't register with our systems, and it won't be, you can't find the person to speak with in our facility for DCYF to be
Correct.
able to, right? And to be able to work this. And then you mentioned the last names thing, like many people have two last names, and sometimes
Yes.
requiring it's making for confusion. So,
Yes.
okay,
Yeah.
I got the gist of it, for sure.
Yes.
And we're
And also,
capturing, just so you guys know, and to answer what Julie mentioned, we are capturing the feedback. And so the specific feedback, Gloria, that you're giving in regards to merit and like what's listed within that system, we can provide to the merit team. I know Jason, that's kind of out of his realm a little bit. He's more about the like website, taking comments on that part. But we're capturing what you're sharing and can definitely provide that feedback to the merit team specifically. And if they have questions, we will ask if we can give them your contact information so that they can contact you directly for additional feedback as well, if that's okay.
yes, I can do that.
Okay.
Yes, because it's coming a lot in my head when new providers tell me, and I have to support them to direct them where they can go and
Right.
tag, and yes.
Yeah, okay, perfect. Yeah, so we're capturing that. And then in the chat, I see a couple more comments and we are capturing that as well. So if we have anything in regards to merit, that will go to the merit team specifically, which is not in Jason's wheelhouse. He doesn't supervise that team. So that's more on the programmatic side, but we can definitely share that and pass that along. And then if there's any additional comments, we can bring the merit team back to a future meeting. I know they came to a previous meeting to talk about merit. So we can definitely bring them back at your guys' request as well. So Jason, I know there's a lot that's been added to the chat, and I know that throughout this, we may get more comments and feedback, and then we will share that with you. And if there's a request for you to come back, or if you have additional information or you've confirm things around the website or the social media aspect or the communication pieces, the emails specifically, feel free to request to come back to provide an update, or we can provide a written update as well.
Okay. Well, thank you, and thanks for the invitation today. I know you have vital work ahead of you, and I really appreciate the chance to introduce myself and talk through some of the communications opportunities. So I really appreciate it. Take care, and I think I'll sign out then unless folks have more questions for me.
Yeah, we have a couple of questions we're going to ask people to answer that we normally do for those of you that have been attending these meetings throughout. There's a link in the chat to answer the question, do you better understand communications and social media for DCYF? I know Jason really was presenting like his team and what they do. And this goes to the survey that a lot of you responded to previously around the website and understanding that, you know, it is run by Drupal, the search engine in itself. So we have a lot of no's. And so if you can add any specific feedback around the no's into the chat, that would be very helpful.
And I just want to add, as far as like the people who selected no, this is a good time to ask Jason any clarifying questions, because right after this, you guys are going to go into a breakout room to talk about some recommendations for communications and social media. So if there is something that you aren't understanding, now would be a great time to ask that question of Jason before you go into the breakout room.
This is Angela Maxey with Tiny Tots, and I responded no, because I didn't get the whole point of, and you see now you have 4 people. I didn't get the understanding of what that topic was about. So it did not resonate with me around DCYF, communication, social media.
Right. And I think I was mainly trying to respond to some of the highlighted issues in the survey, and then to introduce myself and the team itself, and what we do in communications, which, to really sum it up really in a nutshell, is we deal with media relations, right? We do provide some consulting on the emails that folks receive, and over time to convey policy changes and things like this. And also, I'd say that we're also, heavily involved with, web writing, social media writing, responses to media, and.
So are you assuming that we understand, that we get these communications? Maybe that's where the disconnect is, because now it's up to 6 to 1.
It could well be, because that folks responded to the survey with regard to, talking about communications in email and social media. And so if people aren't getting these messages, what would be a better way to get them?
For me, I get a little bit lost on who the audience is. So when I look at your website, it's not for me. It's not for the providers to get information about how to do their jobs better. It's an overview. It seems like it's more of an overview for people who want to see what DCYF is doing, but not so much how I connect in with my program or get questions answered or figure out merit or all of them, or know what to do with COVID or anything like that.
Okay.
The emails that I get from Ross Hunter or DCYF, those are not bad overviews, but they also are not necessarily provider centric. So I'm not exactly sure who's on this call, but as a support for providers, I don't find the social media or the DCYF website helpful. It's not that it's bad, or I think you guys are doing a bad job communicating. It's just that I never felt like I was the audience.
Right. Okay. So that's a clear call for provider focus with regard to a web page development and, you know, basically messaging. So, you know, in the emails.
Yeah, it was funny because I think during COVID, everybody was like, where is DCYF? You know, and I think that it wasn't that DCYF wasn't doing anything. It was just clearly, I mean, you guys were super busy and everybody was, but it was that the messaging never felt like, hey, we see you, we're here for you. This is what you need to be doing. And thank God you're doing it kind of thing. So then I just stopped looking there and looked elsewhere for information.
Are we just kind of jumping in?
Yeah, go for it.
Hi, Nicole Stone, provider in Spokane. I kind of want to reemphasize what has just been said too, and I have to think about that when I'm designing my communication for my teachers or my customers. There's something that it's, what do I want to tell them, or what do they need or want to know? And I think that, you know, I couldn't really put my finger on it until I just heard other people talking just now, but that is what I feel when I go to DCYF's website. It's what you want to tell, or what DCYF wants to tell me, but not necessarily in a way I either want or need to know it. Does that make sense? So that did just kind of click how I feel when I try to go through the website. And then with the COVID communications or just the emails, I don't know, or even any updates, the timeliness, you know, the updates were relevant, but they were often 2 weeks after it happened. So at that point, there was something new we were moving on to, and I don't have 2 weeks to decide how I implement things in my program. I have today to decide how I implement things in my program, and not just around COVID, but around a lot of safety and programmatic things. You know, today I sent safety messaging to my customers on how we're keeping kids safe, not in 2 weeks. So that's what I would add to that.
And I mean, one of the things that I sensed in the responses that we received was that social media is not something that a lot of people are working on, because that's when it's a tool for more two-way engagement and, you know, direct communication, but it doesn't sound like it, you know, do people just not have time for that? Is that not an effective space, or am I misinterpreting? Okay. Got it. So I'm not misinterpreting.
Colleen has her hand raised as well. Colleen, go for it.
Thank you. Along the same lines of what was just shared, I think they both said it really well, but I also just wanted to kind of go back to some communications that came out from DCYF early in COVID. One email in particular calling out hairdressers as being people who may be able to step in and provide childcare in the current climate and need, you know, as schools were closing down and whatnot. And I just want to emphasize how disrespectful that was to providers, because I'm not going to go in and dye somebody's hair tomorrow, nor would I think that I should be allowed to do those kinds of things. And I think it was a huge misstep on DCYF's part to let a communication like that go out, because we do hard work and we're skilled, and we don't deserve to be belittled to the extent that, like, hey, someone else could just step in and do what we do tomorrow because there's some sort of emergency happening. I think that was a huge misstep, and I also think that's something DCYF needs to reflect better on in relationship building moving forward.
Colleen, when did that happen? That my wife is in childcare, and at least in the childcare, she helps you know, teach people, and she's monitoring childcare. She doesn't work for DCYF; she works for a college. But yeah, this is not a super message. When did that happen?
Right as COVID hit. I want to say it was in March of 2020 that message went out. And hairdressers was one example, but there were other suggestions given in there. And I think that it was a huge misstep, and I think it caused a lot of hurt that really hasn't ever even been apologized for when that message was sent out. But it was really disheartening as a provider to see an email come through that says, hey, why don't those of you who aren't allowed to work right now pop up and do what these other people do? Because as if we don't need to have a skill set to do what we do. So anyways, I couldn't not bring that point up, because especially if we're talking about communications, like not only could communications be clearer, but they also need to go a further step towards relationship building and just like a baseline respect of what we do all day, every day. You know, the department may oversee childcare, but we're actually the people who do the work. And to see the department take credit for high quality and those kinds of things when it's really not the work that they're doing, we're doing it. So yeah, I know that sentiment is probably shared by a lot of providers, either here today or otherwise.
Okay. Well, that is a troubling anecdote, and this was before my time, but I can't apologize for that. This is you know, obviously we wouldn't be, you know, saying, hey, we have a shortage of dentists, so, you know, why don't I just go over and do that? You know, this is a field that requires skill, talent, experience, and frankly, a knack. And I think when I seen people in this field doing this work in a good way, you can see the life trajectories of children changing and becoming more rich and enriched. So, you know, maybe that's what should have been said, or something closer.
I agree, Jason. Thank you for your response, and recognize that was before your time with DCYF, but wanted to bring that point up.
I see Susan Brown's hand up.
Sorry, Susan.
Hey, thanks, Angie, for noticing that. I was just going to say that, you know, when I think about value statements, often those of us, especially in the nonprofit sector, they say your budget reflects your values. And when I think about the state of Washington and see that, you know, 52% of our state budget goes to public education and less than 2% to youth programs and childcare, that's a value statement. And then when you get feedback like, well, see if hairdressers can sub for you or fill in, that's a value statement. And I think there needs to be some serious reflection within the department and amongst department staff to recognize that put all these requirements on us for if you want to achieve this rating, you have to have this level of education in your staff and so on and so forth. And then on the flip side, you know, other things like that happen. And I think DCYF staff should push harder to increase the percentage of the state budget that is allocated to childcare. And in addition to that, should the capital gains tax thing actually go through, rather than have all the funds just go into the Educational Legacy Trust Fund with allowable expenses like childcare, there should be dedicated revenue from those capital gains taxes, not just allowable expenses for where that money should go. So that's just my 2 cents for today. And hopefully something really positive will come out of the feedback that we're offering, where real action is taken, not just the comments that we hear often, which is, well, we've taken a note of that. And then it goes into like that circular, or feels like it goes into the circular file that never gets retrieved from. So anyway, thank you for bearing with my comments.
No, and I think it's not bearing with. I mean, I think this is healthy to hear. And I'll say that Deanna and I both work with the government affairs team regularly in the policy team. And we've certainly, like the Fair Start for Kids Act is evidence of really pushing that particular effort, because I think many people on the staff, you know, agree that there's an imbalance that with regard to. It's great that we are investing heavily in the state and education, but it still doesn't mean that it's balanced. So, hey, Gloria, I see your hand.
Yes, thank you. And also I supporting what she say, because it's the same situation in my culture. We have a lot of providers who want to follow with the DCYF regulations, but it's not enough schools who has several groups to accepting a lot of students and have bilingual teachers. Also, like providers, we're going to comply with that, but also we have our assistants or staff, like they need to comply with classes. And also in the colleges, I don't know if they don't have much funding, but they accept a group of providers in a bilingual class, but they keep providing materials in English when it's not the first language. But we don't have enough colleges with bilingual teachers, bilingual Spanish materials. We don't have mass access. And I was talking with somebody the other day. I had an interview about that. I don't going to be surprised if in 2024, when DCYF starts requesting everything because we have until that day, a lot of providers are going to close because they don't want to comply with the regulations because it's not enough money for providers, and also it's not enough money to hire the staff requesting them those classes, going to school with a low pay, like minimum pay, and go to school and do this training. And you have to have these requirements. Staff, they prefer to go to some place else. They don't requiring too much things, and they're going to earn the minimum wage or a little more extra. I think we have to keep asking, advocating through DCYF and DCYF through the government to put more money, more funding for child care providers, because we are the first who have these beautiful children in our hands, and we have to help them to develop their strengths. We have to see how and where they are behind, and we're going to support them to keep going and be successful in the school. We're doing the hard job with less money, with less support, but yeah, we are requested to do a lot of things. And we are happy to do the classes, but put the support ahead over there. All the schools has to have enough classrooms for these teachers, because I'm here where I live, sometimes only accept this number of students and they don't accept more, and then other they have to wait for the next quarter or next year. They need to provide the tools, the money, and invest, and we will be happy to comply with that, but has to be equal, has to be even. And I was advocating before, like the schools have a lot of money. They have their own building. They have a lot of staff, and year after year they receive that. And we had to go with the little budget we have, but we had to keep complying and complying. And I think we need a lot of support. Everybody who is in this field, the early learning, and we need a lot of support, and we are happy to do the regulations, to comply with regulations, because we want to improve the quality of our programs. We want to be better and better and better, but we need the tools provided by the state, provided by the government, and we can be happy to do that. Please.
And I'm hearing clear support for the work that we do in terms of legislative work to try to achieve some of these aims, and you know, while that isn't directly related to communications, it certainly touches upon communications because we help make those arguments, right? And yes. And I think I also want to recognize that you know, a lot of folks here were very excited about the childcare provisions of the Build Back Better on the federal level, and still have high hopes of that resurrecting. So, you know, I think that's my way of saying is, you know, certainly in my nearly 11 months here, I've heard a lot of folks mirroring what you're saying around the agency as I talk to people. And so if that helps to indicate that we have some awareness, I hope it does. But anyway, I wanted to at least respond. And also, Susie, I don't know if your hand was up before and I missed you, but I do see your hand there now. So.
Well, I have one of those things that for a communications person, it just always rubs me the wrong way. And I might be very much alone in this, but the font used when it comes to early learning is somehow super disrespectful to me. I don't like the crayon and the cutesy fonts kinds of things when it comes to early learning, and then all other education is very serious. I think there's a time and a place for that kind of playfulness, but
Yeah.
I swear every time I get one, it's like, handprints and fun colors and crayon writing and that kind of thing. And I just feel like as we get accused of not presenting professionally, which
Yeah.
I totally disagree with. I
Yeah.
do not think in the last 100 years, the people that have done this work have ever presented as unprofessional. They're just women, and so maybe that's unprofessional enough. But anyway, as a communications person, I'm like, that just bugs me. So I figured I'd say it.
I'm going to say this comment, and it's a bit flippant, but recognize that I come from a family of teachers. So how do you feel about, Apple themed coffee cups? Yeah, I think I know we can put that, right? We'll store that on the shelf. So anyhow, I really do appreciate this feedback and your patience with my levity. But yeah, I will bring that back to my design team. I don't feel that I haven't seen many of that, crayons and apples and that kind of thing develop through my team. But
I haven't either. I'm not pointing the finger at you.
Watch for it.
It's just think in general, every time I see it, I get this cringe. So
I hear you. Well,
All right. Oh, go
I
ahead. Sorry,
hope
Jason.
that at least that I've started to help introduce what communications does for the agency through the clarifying statements and answers to your questions. And I really do appreciate you investing some time with me and investing time in this group. So, all right, well.
Thank you, Jason. And it's super helpful. We've captured a lot of the feedback you all have suggested, and Jason will be connecting with you after this as well, just to make sure that we're following up with all of the comments. And then if there's any additional questions that we can provide feedback to, we will do so before the next meeting in writing, as most of you are well aware. And then also during the June 15th meeting, as a reminder, we will be talking through the recommendations that we've received thus far through all of the meetings that we've had up until now, including this one for communications. So we will be talking through those recommendations and working with this group to come up to solidify the key recommendations that are coming up so far. And then we will walk through what's next in regards to future presentations to get us to wrapping up key recommendations before the fall. All right, so I'm going to turn it over to Emily.
I had to find my unmute button. So we are a little bit ahead of schedule. We're scheduled to go to break from 2:15 to 2:30, but I think since we're done with the communications topic for now, we'll come back to it when we're making recommendations later on. We can just go ahead and go to break now and come back. Let's see, 15 minutes would be about 2:08. So take a quick break, get water, take care of yourself, and we will resume the meeting at 2:08 with the background check presentation.
Thanks all.
Hello. We're on break.
Recording in progress.
Okay, it is 2:08, so we'll go ahead and get started again. Our next topic is going to be the background check update and update to the background check process. And before we begin this presentation, I just want to call out that we know a lot of you have some really impactful lived experiences and stories around the background check system. And due to time constraints, instead of sharing those verbally during this meeting, we do encourage you to send us your stories or lived experiences in writing to the DCOF community engagement email, and I'll put that in the chat in just a second. And we will include those stories as either an addendum or as quotes in the emergency recommendation regarding the background check update process. So we really want to get through the presentation and get you guys into breakout groups to discuss what recommendations you have for the background check system. So again, just encourages you guys all to send your experiences and stories to our community engagement inbox, and I'll drop that in the chat in just a second. And I will turn it over to Matt, Chris, and Carrie Ann to talk about background checks.
Hi, everybody. My name is Matt Judge. I'm the Child Care Administrator here at Department of Children, Youth, and Families. And I'll turn to Chris to introduce himself, and then Carrie.
Hello, everyone. Chris Parton, Provider Supports Administrator. I oversee a few programs, and background checks is one of them.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Carrie Vincent. I'm the Background Check Program Manager.
So first off, I wanted to thank everybody who participated in the survey. It was really revealing and confirmed some maybe instincts that we had about pain points around the background check. I have a little PowerPoint here, and I'm going to try to be briefer with my part than I was when I spoke to you weeks back about Child Care and Development Fund, but I want to make sure that we provide some background on the issue so that it's clear where we're at and why we're there. Anything else you want to say, Chris, before we get started?
No, and again, Carrie and I will be brief as well because we know that you probably have more questions than we have information to provide.
Next slide, please. So what we're going to go over here is just the Child Care and Development Fund requirements around background check and the history of how we got to where we are right now with new staff background checks in particular. Then talk about the portable background check turnaround times here at DCYF, the topic of the possibility of separating portable background check elements to meet the federal requirements, some work we're doing around background check fees, and then a little bit about the background check work group. Next slide, please. So as I mentioned weeks ago, Washington State, like other states, receives this Child Care and Development Fund grant. This is federal funding for childcare in the states. And it's the biggest single source of funds at DCYF. And with any federal funds that the states receive, there are strings attached. And some of those strings are around health and safety requirements. In 2018, the feds enacted new rules around CCDF that in part addressed background checks. And some of the main takeaways are that for licensed providers in the states, they're requiring all staff to receive either clearance on an FBI fingerprint background check or a state criminal fingerprint background check before starting work. And if they only have one of those elements, they have to be supervised and they have to complete all elements of the background check before they can work unsupervised under those rules. And to the right in this slide, you can see the elements that go into the background check, what a complete check requires. So one of the things I just want to highlight here is that when the federal rule says that staff could begin working while supervised if they have the state criminal check or the FBI check, but are awaiting the others, both of those checks need to be fingerprint checks. And if one of them is going to be relied upon for those staff to start work while under supervision, it has to be a fingerprint check as well.
And one thing I just want to add, Matt, is if you're looking at this, and I lifted this from the Office of Child Care website, the picture of the background check components, if you look at the left side, that's for persons who have lived in Washington for the last 5 years consecutively before their application. And then if you've lived outside of the state within the last 5 years before your background application, there are those 3 additional interstate requirements on the right side.
Next slide, please. So Chris mentioned Office of Child Care. So within the Administration for Children and Families, you have this Office of Child Care, and that's the organization that administers the CCDF grant, and we kind of report to them about meeting requirements. So if I refer to the feds, that's kind of, I'm talking about Office of Child Care or OCC. So during this transition period, when the states were becoming compliant with the new background check requirements, Office of Child Care allowed the states to ask for a waiver from the requirements. So this was the period October 2018 through February 2020. And DCYF was one of many states that applied for and was approved a waiver to give us more time around this requirement. And frankly, in hopes that it would be overturned, because arguably, and I still believe this is true, that the federal law really didn't authorize Office of Child Care to implement rules requiring new staff to have full clearance before working without supervision. So in 2019, DCYF submitted a document to Office of Child Care outlining our argument about that and requesting relief from the requirement. So sometime in 2020, it seemed that we would be required to go to the new background check for new staff. But then COVID-19 happened. And once again, Office of Child Care was allowing waivers from that requirement. And so this was the situation from February 2020 through October 1st, 2021. DCYF applied for one of those waivers. We applied for an extension. And so we had that waiver through October 1st, 2021. With the new requirement coming online, we were, asking Office of Child Care, will there be an extension to the waivers? And their indication was that there would not. So we submitted a letter requesting relief in September, and Office of Child Care declined to provide any further relief. So we decided to continue the existing policy, meaning we would not be in compliance with the CCDF requirement. And our basis for doing that was the governor's proclamation and the state of emergency that we were still under for COVID-19. But as you may know, that will be rescinded as of July 1st, 2022. And that kind of puts us on new footing with regard to the background check. So Julie's comment in the chat was about, I think about, if I understand it correctly, it's about the federal rule saying that a background check needs to be completed before the staff can work. And I think the question there is whether that means they have to have clearance. And my understanding is that it does mean that they have to have clearance, not just that they have applied for or are in any stage of the process, but have to have clearance.
Yes, and we'll address that later in the separating into PBC elements. And also I will touch upon Virginia and some of the other states we've looked at as well.
So next slide, please. So there have been inquiries in the past about whether DCYF could seek a waiver from complying with the requirement now. Just to be clear about that, waivers have only been available at specified times that Office of Child Care designated. So they've indicated to us that they would not approve any further waiver that we requested when we asked for relief back in September. So the waivers that were available during COVID-19 were only for that period and are no longer available. So right now we're compliant with all the requirements around the background check, all the elements of them, except as to new staff. And that means technically we are under corrective action with Office of Child Care. And we'll be placed we would be placed normally on a timeline to get compliant, but monetary penalties are possible if we don't comply with the corrective action timelines and don't start implementing this requirement. And in answer to the chat, yes, I'm happy to get a formal guidance from Office of Child Care that clearance is required, and that's my understanding from conversation with them.
Yeah, Matt, I'll just go ahead and add this right now. So the language is that you need to satisfactorily complete either the FBI fingerprint check or the in-state, which is our Washington State Patrol fingerprint check, before you can start work and work supervised. But I will explain why we are going and saying cleared when I go and break down the actual process in the background check.
So the next slide is about timelines. And at that point, I'll turn it over to Chris because I'm no expert about specifics around that.
Okay, thanks. And then Carrie, if you can help me with monitoring the chat too. So the turnaround time, we gathered some data prior to COVID in preparation to comply with the CCDF background check requirements. And we wanted to track and see where each point in the process and how long it takes. What we did find is that it took an average of 19 days. 19 days was from the day that the person ended up going into Merit and then submitting their portable background check application. And then to the time that we submit and we issue and render the final cleared status. And that was an average. Now, obviously, people who have history do take a little bit more time. And with the Fields versus Dell Department of Early Learning decision back in 2019, I believe it was, we do conduct individualized assessments for persons who have criminal history. That's not automatically disqualifying, but may relate directly to child safety. So those do take a little bit more time. Those are not considered in these figures here. So when you look at the process, currently, because we charge a fee for the application and the way our process and the way our payment system processes those fees, it could take up to 5 days for that to happen. And until that fee is processed, we cannot even start the background application. So we recognize that that is a problem. And that's why we also, we asked and we received for the fiscal year 23, and that'll be in other slides, to be able to not charge a fee so we can eliminate that 5 days. And then once the payment is cleared, we can submit the application over to DSHS, and our system automatically will send an email to the applicant with the email address that they used in Merit. So I did see in the communication presentation that sometimes you may have used a different email address. Whatever you have in Merit and you submitted your background check application under, that's where the email is going to go for your fingerprint appointment form. And you also should probably check your junk email as well. So that is submitted the same day. It's automated. It could be the next day, depending on when the system receives it. And then what we found is that after receiving the fingerprint appointment form, it took on average 4.5 days for the applicant to schedule their fingerprint appointment. So that means that, and again, a lot of this time is probably because there was no urgency to schedule these appointments, because you didn't have to, all you had to do is submit the application to be able to start work. And that, we recognize that that's going to change. And then when the individual did schedule the fingerprint appointment, their appointment was about 4.5 days later. Now, we just got new data that was from October 21st to May 23rd recently, and those numbers have only changed from 4.5 to 5 days and 4.5 to 5 days as well. The time it takes for us to get the fingerprint results after the person goes to their scheduled appointment and submits fingerprints is 1 to 3 days. And we just got new data on that as well. And actually, after the person attends their fingerprint appointment, it takes us 2 days to receive the fingerprint appointments for persons who don't have history or history that requires a review. And then we issue the clearance on the same day or next business day. So is there anything in the chat, Carrie, that you see that's related to this?
Yes, sir. There's a lot of stuff in the chat. Not sure if it's if you want me to pick and choose, or there's a lot. I think it's something that's kind of similar to what was mentioned earlier, maybe something that we need to address.
Yeah, go ahead.
Really?
In the order we got them.
All right. So let me go back up here. Julie was mentioning, or you said you addressed that and is about separating the PBC elements. She had asked a question about prospective staff may begin working after the process of getting fingerprints completed, which would allow for pending individuals to work supervised at all times. So I think you already addressed that.
No, I will address it. And in fact, if you want to go to the next slide, Emily, I appreciate that. I think this might be the separating. So, and the reason why I wanted to kind of point this out, and then this will answer Julie's question, is we go through the DSHS system, who interfaces with the Washington State Patrol to do our background checks. The DSHS system right now does not have the ability to separate and give us two separate background check results from the State Patrol and the FBI. However, that said, we did ask about how long does it take between the differences. And what we found was they did numbers from the beginning of this year until just 2 days ago, and nearly 27,000 fingerprint checks. The FBI and the State Patrol fingerprint results came within 110 minutes of each other, so less than 2 hours. So it's what we assumed is that persons who don't have history, that information comes back the same day. And so we wouldn't see a benefit for getting them separately. And because we don't get a benefit, we don't see a benefit separating those. And the fingerprint results take the longest amount of time to get the results. Everything else required by CCDF, the sex offender registry check, the child abuse registry check, we already have that information and we're waiting on the fingerprint results. So when we do get the fingerprint results, we can actually issue a cleared, and there's no need to do a provisional because the cleared has everything and then the person can work unsupervised. That's the reason why we are not choosing to do provisional, because we're getting both the in-state and every other component that's required at the same time. And Virginia, as far as Virginia having a turnaround time for 72 hours, as you can see, we're getting the results back after the person fingerprints. We're getting those results back also within 1 to 2 days. So that's right around 72-hour time frame. So Carrie, what else did we have in there?
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
Why, I think you've probably given this to the legislators and to DCYF, and you have this down. This is not our experience. So what is the disconnect between why we are absolutely on fire about what is happening with background checks and your very calm, seemingly totally reasonable experience with what you're providing? Like, there is a huge disconnect between our experience and what you're saying. Where is that coming from?
Yeah, Susie, I agree. I mean, I didn't choose to do this work. In 2011, I participated in an audit for child welfare because we weren't doing background checks well at all. And I was put in a position because I sought improvements. And I think I'm in this position because I want to always better this work. And when I heard about all these issues that were coming, and I do know that the payment system in the portable background check was going to be a hindrance, I did advocate for that, and I did advocate for the payments, as well did the child care community. So that's going to help with that. But when I look at the data, and then when I hear these, persons saying that it's taken, 3 months, 2 months, 3 weeks to do the background check, Nicole Rose and I, for the last year or even 2+ years, when this is about to come out, we've asked for those individual names. I want to be able to see where they are at in the system. And that's why today we're asking any background check that takes more than 2 weeks, please give us that person's name so we can look and see what is happening.
How do you want us to give you the names? Because I got a bunch.
Yes, so we do have an email address and a phone number as well, and that will be in the presentation. It's in the slide, but Carrie is also going to put that in the chat as well. So Susie, I don't know necessarily that I'm not concerned. I am concerned. It's just that I really want to be able to dive into this and be able to trace one from beginning to end. And when I get the data in our system, I'm finding these numbers here. And when I see 98.6%.
Okay, this is Gloria. Last Friday, I support one of the possible staff to apply for her background check. We did the application, we paid the $12. Until now, today is Wednesday. She didn't receive any notice about the finger appointment, to schedule appointment for fingerprints. And that takes more than 2 weeks sometimes, or a month. Takes 2 weeks to receive the second email for the fingerprints, and then they schedule the appointment for the fingerprints, and take another 2 weeks to be clear. And most of those is happening around this area in Wenatchee. And sometimes the no, I will say not 100%, but at least the 20% is being called again because the fingerprints were grown or too wrongly, and they had to come back again. But yes, that takes more days that is mentioned in here, and we have that challenge most of the time in here, and we really like the process going to be easy and simple.
Yeah, right now there is a payment, and I do recognize that the payment process does take, in the information that we have, it could take up to a week. And it depends too on how you're paying. If you do end up paying or mailing in a check, that could take a little bit longer as well. And we
That was paid by credit card online.
Okay. So yeah, that should have been cleared. And then the fingerprint appointment form is sent automatically by the system. And so we ask people to check their junk mail as well. I think we also put it in a template, or is there anything that we put on the application side, Carrie, yet to inform folks to maybe check their junk mail when they're submitting, to look for those fingerprint appointment forms?
No.
Okay. So we're looking at trying to update so we can get template language, so that way it is pretty clear and communicate that people should also be looking in their spam or junk mail for those fingerprint appointment forms. But also, that's why I'm saying, if they don't get something back within, well, I know a lot of this, I'm asking for folks, after this process starts in July 1, but if you have things that are lasting more than 2 weeks, then we want you to contact us.
I am Michelle from Creative Kids in Ellensburg. What about, so that there's a turnout around time that you're talking about, but what about us that are in Kittitas County, Yakima County, who have a 3-hour drive just to send staff who can't even be hired, to send them 3 hours to go get fingerprinted? That's time as well. And when somebody is giving us a 2-week notice, I would like to know what is DCYF saying about that? That is nearly impossible. And to require us to have staff do a fingerprint and have it turned around before we can even hire them, when there is no fingerprint places in our town, is absolutely asinine, and it's unacceptable. It's impossible. So I'd like to know what the response is there.
Yeah, and Carrie has been working with our fingerprint vendor directly, and she is really advocating for another site in Ellensburg. There has been issues. We are updating our contract with the fingerprint vendor, and it's going from, we're requiring to go from a 50-mile radius to a 30-mile radius. They are going to have to stand up some sites that have fallen, off the radar over the last few months recently. They are trying to stand everything up in the post-pandemic world, even though they're still having difficulties trying to get persons to contract with them. So they don't have staff who actually do the fingerprinting. They want people who want to do fingerprinting services for them to work for them. And it's another option that we threw out. We don't expect that the child care community is the one that has to do the fingerprinting, but that is an option, that if there are some sites out there that want to be a fingerprint site, that the equipment and the training and everything would be provided at no cost to them.
Hillary, are you saying that us as providers are able to do the fingerprints?
That is an option. We did share that information in another communication, I believe, and we can share that information as here as well. I don't know if we included it in a slide, but we will definitely get that out to this group. Hillary?
Yeah, so if you are stuck with Identigo for getting this expedited, why is it that so many of their locations exclude the DCYF fingerprinting, and can't we just simply add those to it? And does that help us to get better coverage? I mean, it's egregious for some of these folks in Eastern Washington to have that kind of turnaround. Even in my area, and we're a very populated area, it's at least an hour and 15-minute round trip, if not an hour and a half or two, for the locations that are closest to us. This is ridiculous. There's several in our town. If it would just be available to do something beyond TSA PreCheck.
It is ridiculous. I agree with you. And so, Carrie, can you please ask Trent about if they already have sites and why they're exclusive and not to DCYF?
Absolutely.
Chris, Dawn has had her hand up for a while.
Oh, sorry, Dawn. It's my screen isn't.
I think she's talking to someone.
Yeah, she is.
Sorry about that. I had a staff member at my door.
Hey, you wait for us. We'll wait for you. That's totally fine.
My question is the language with the federal background language, because we, as a group, we have read through this repeatedly. It does not state that the fingerprint has to be clear, just completed. And then there's a separate section state right underneath that states they can be left alone, or they can be working as long as they are supervised. So I need to know why there's an extra barrier there for Washington State is putting in that we can't have them in this working supervised. I'm not saying they're ever going to be left alone with a child, but why can't they be in here working supervised until their fingerprints are clear?
Yeah, correct. That's a great point. So but the fingerprint results have to come back. It's not that they just submit fingerprints.
No, it doesn't. That's not what the language states at all. That is not, because we have read this repeatedly. I put the language in there. We put the link to the language. We can provide more links, but it just says that the fingerprint has to be completed, not clear. If it was clear, they would have stated that it needed to be cleared, not completed.
Can I just address that? So I explored that as well, but their language that is extra guidance on the rule that we're talking about states that they have to have cleared. And
where is that language then? Because we would really like to be able to see that language, because what we have access to, which is the federal guidance, does not state that.
So the federal rule doesn't state that. The language is posted in the chat there, and it comes from the CCDF plan, and their language in the CCDF plan is effective guidance for their programs.
So that's not something I'm at all familiar with. Every time we've asked this question, we are told, well, it's the federal, that's what the federal government states we have to do. I've asked this question before this meeting, and I have been told repeatedly, oh, that's the new federal background check guidance. That is not what the federal guidance states. In fact, there's a section immediately under saying that the fingerprints are completed, that they then can work on as long as they are supervised. So that is where, like, I need to have a link and be shown this exact language and where that is coming from, because everything I can find does not state anything that it has to be cleared fingerprints.
I will post the language in the chat.
And guidance is not a law. So what is a law versus guidance? Because that whole word guidance is guidance. Doesn't mean it's the law.
It does not mean that's what should be followed. It is putting a huge hardship on us. And so a guidance is something that's not going to put hardship on every single childcare provider in this state. So yes, it can be guidance, but you don't trust the directors and staff to make a decision about who can be around children. Like, that is ridiculous. Like, it is utterly ridiculous that we aren't being trusted to have any kind of good judgment here. And so what it states, what the law states, the wording is that it just needs to be completed. If they wanted it to be cleared, they would have said cleared.
I agree.
So all I can tell you is that the federal guidance does have the effect of law if it were to go to court. And if you want, I will happily request official guidance from them. But
I think official guidance really needs to be taken, and I also would like to see this language written here, because that is something that is not out there for everyone to see. So if you're saying this is some guidance that only DCYF is being given, again, this goes back to the whole thing when all this came out of fingerprint, oh, everything's changing and it's federal, it's the federal government. Well, we weren't told it was the federal government really to begin with. Now it's, oh, well, now it's federal guidance that we have to follow. So every time it seems like you guys are coming up with another reason why this has to be in place. And if we're searching there, if we're looking at the federal law and it doesn't state that, that's looking bad on you guys. And I want to have a good relationship with DCYF. I don't want to have this like us versus them mentality that seems to be out there right now. But this is not okay that this kind of hardship is constantly being put on providers that we get no say. Oh, sorry, that's just what it is. So like, if you guys are stating this is guidance you are getting, then that information should be provided to us immediately and not now suddenly, oh, now it's suddenly guidance, right? So
and doesn't it make more sense
from you guys if you are changing up the excuse every single time that we ask?
And doesn't it make more sense for you to work with a supervised person? I mean, just from a business standpoint, all of us are not going to let an unsupervised person, even if they are cleared. They've got to work with a supervised person to learn the cadence of your program, the flavor of your thing. You want to work with them supervised for a while. Yeah. That to me is more safe.
So, I mean, I understand. Look, I know you don't know me personally. I am a fence tester. I have looked, and even Nicole even sent a letter to OCC, and that's what Matt had, I think it was in September of 21. We challenged their interpretation of the requirement for new staff starting. I have also looked at this as well as our AGs. So we will provide that language because we wouldn't just roll over or not accept that. We'd gain nothing from delay.
Chris, that is not at all what I'm saying. What my point here is, and I can say from several of these people that are sitting in this meeting right now, that we've all had the same experience. Each time we try and push anything back against these background checks or even other rules, we're told we get an excuse, and it feels, and whether it's real or not, it feels like an excuse to us. So then we look up what reason that we're being given. We do our research, we come back and it's like, oh, no, now it's this. And so it keeps changing every time we bring this up. And it's another reason why we can't do it. It's another, and I'm going to say excuse because that's what it feels like to us. It feels like another excuse is being placed. Oh, no, sorry. You guys just don't know what you're talking about. We've done our research here and we've sat as a group of very intelligent, well-minded people to also look into this, and we're not finding that language that you're saying that that's coming from. So now it feels like another excuse is being added in. Oh, no, it's always been this way. Well, if it's always been that way, why weren't we told that from the beginning?
I'd like
and
to
that's
add
all
that,
I'm done there. Sorry, thank you.
I'd like to add that if DCYF wanted to demonstrate that they understood that this was going to be a problem and they were prepared for it, they would have used their connection to the organization that they contracted with and made sure that there were plenty of places for people to have easy access to fingerprinting. If you are seriously concerned about people and they're getting fingerprinting, then that should be an easy process. It is for K-12 folks. It is for everybody else. And you're asking people who work long hours for no money to drive 168 miles to get fingerprinted. When are they going to do that? Are you going to pay them to do that? Like nothing DCYF has done has made this easy or reasonable. Instead, we're in a conversation with DCYF saying there's nothing we can do. And that's exhausting and not supportive. And it feels like we're fighting up against a brick wall, which we've now been doing for 6 months. And in that 6 months, this company should have been gearing up. And if they couldn't do it, then their contract needed to be finished and a different organization needed to be hired. If K-12 can manage this, why is it that we can't help these providers get what they need to get the staff they need to stay open? And then it feels like, why are we fighting with the organization that's supposed to be supporting us? Like, that just feels so weird. I don't know what to say. Like, it's fine. You guys do it. You guys, fine. I'll give you do it in 72 hours, but it takes us 168 miles to get the fingerprints done. So do something about that. It's really frustrating.
We did hear that, and that's why we ended up piloting a different fingerprint vendor. We thought the grass was greener, and it ended up being even worse. In fact, then when they had to go back, and DSHS also tried to go over to FieldPrint, which was a vendor that was given to us by somebody in the community to look at because they do organs. And when we piloted them for, I don't know, Carrie, 6 months maybe, it was actually worse. And so they put out a request for providers again, DSHS did. And then our current vendor, IDEMIA or Identico, they stepped up and they agreed to lower the radius within site availability to 30 miles. And so we are working on that contract now and to stand that up by July 1st. And so, yes, they are having some issues right now. We are still under that small window of the proclamation that's going to be ending, but we are pressuring them as much as you're pressuring us right now to stand up those sites, to come up with some sort of, capacity in order to do this. And it is something that, again, in a later slide about the background check work group, it is something that I will be advocating on behalf of providers and our agency.
So what are you going to do if they don't hold up their end of the bargain? Because I spoke with Carrie last week about trying to get some staff printed in Yakima. My staff are traveling 3 hours to get prints. They're only offered in Kennewick 2 days a week, Tuesday and Wednesday. So I'm having to cover to try to get the staff relief to be able to commute 3 hours. And when I spoke with her, she said it was Intego that they don't have a permanent space to operate. So you guys are relying on an unreliable printing firm, and that's not our problem. That's really DCYF's problem, because you guys choose who to contract with and you tell us where we have to go when all the local law enforcement agencies take prints, but you only accept the ones that you contract with.
Carrie, do you want to comment about the site availability in Yakima?
Yeah, hi, Laura. Yeah, we did talk last week. They did announce today that they will have a temporary site in Yakima, which the availability, unfortunately, will only be every Monday. They are looking for a permanent site.
But that doesn't work. 1 day a week is not sufficient if you expect us to have everyone cleared. 1 day a week that's a DCYF issue, not a provider issue. And the problem is that when we don't have staff to take care of kids are not going to be able to come to us. So where are these kids going to go? They're going to end up in unsafe spaces, unmonitored by mandated reporters, and stresses on families are going to increase because parents are going to have to miss work, which we all know increases the chances of abuse and neglect for children. This is a big problem.
Yes, we are going to work with them on that. The site utilization is something that's put out. These are businesses that are operated based on the amount of customers that they get, because they get paid by the fingerprints. And when they have 528 appointments available in Yakima in April, and only 284 of them were used, that means that they're only making half of what they could make. And that's why a lot of these sites have turnover. So they're trying to figure out their business model. We do have a contract with them. If they don't uphold their part of the contract, that is something that we could go to look for someone else. But we would have to be able to find, again, when we looked at another vendor that was in Washington, it was FieldPrint, and that was not as good.
Well, they're not holding up because they don't have prints in Yakima, and they won't have them until June 6th. I've sent 3 staff to the Tri-Cities for prints. They're not holding up. And We don't have another option as providers because that's who you choose to contract with. It's a DCYF issue.
Chris, it may be that Fieldprint wasn't a great provider of fingerprints back in the day. I mean, I remember when fingerprints took like 4 months. They've come a long way. I don't remember who the provider was then. But maybe it's time to take another look at Fieldprint. And I just was reading the federal language that Matt sent over page 221. And it does say that they have to have the fingerprints completed with a qualifying result or something like that. Which is why we keep saying that it should be separated from the state checks. Like we have to rely on DSHS to get their portion done. The fingerprints take so long because of location access, because we have to go through getting the email from you guys in order to do it. There's just a big delay. And if we could just have somebody walk into, you know, a UPS or whatever, like they do in Virginia, they could have their fingerprint results back within 12 to 72 hours. So, you know, and then it went on to say in the federal language, describe how you're going to be in compliance, and it noted the WAC. So our state put this barrier in place that says we can't hire until it's all cleared. But really the only part in the federal language that says it has to be cleared is the fingerprint. So we're back to, why can't we get fingerprints done at OSPI, with the state patrol, with somebody else? We have to rely on you guys rather than other agencies. Washington State Patrol has said they could do it. And so, you know, again, we're back to separating them.
So I think that's a good point. Can we get an answer to that? Why is it that we can't use State Patrol or other organizations to get this done?
So the Washington State Patrol only does fingerprints in their Olympia site. They don't do it at their substations or other places around the state. So that's one reason. And also when the fingerprint check, and Julie, I don't know if you joined in late or not, but when the fingerprint results do come back, the State Patrol and the FBI results are coming back within 110 minutes. That's less than 2 hours of each other. So we don't benefit from, and then when we do get those fingerprint results, we have everything else to issue the final CCDF clearance. So there is no reason to do provisional when we can just say you're cleared to work unsupervised.
No, I mean, if we had the ability to continue like we have forever, where a person can work under supervision, they have the fingerprint result back because they went to their local school district, or they talked to their sheriff's department and they'll do it. I mean, there's lots of places that have said they would do it. I wasn't aware that Washington State Patrol would only do it in Olympia. But that's, you know, we'll ask more questions. But it just, when there's so many problems with this vendor, and there's so many problems with it being tied to DSHS being involved, I get that the prints are taking a long time. The appointments being available, having locations, the commute, the hours that they're available, the number of days a week they're open, like there's waiting on the email, checking the spam. There's so many barriers. So it just feels like if it was separated, people knew where they could go to send their staff person in their town to get fingerprinted, then we wouldn't be all freaking out right now.
And what is the penalty for failure to comply?
So with the CCDF grants, the penalty is up to 5% of the largest portion of the grant for the state. So that's several $1 million. And then if we continue not to comply, they can rescind the grant altogether, which is the biggest part of our state's early learning budget.
So are there other places that fingerprinting could be done that isn't reliant on this company?
Can I jump in? This is Gary. I've had my hand up for a minute and I wanted to address that issue. I appreciate the point you are all making that the fingerprinting itself is a quick turnaround from the State Patrol or federal, but it seems that what the issue is when that happens, that happens a couple of weeks into the process. So I would look at some process flow diagrams about how does the school district do it differently to get that print done right up front, and work with your vendor to figure out how can whoever they're getting, if there are places like school districts or county sheriffs or others that could have intergovernmental agreements with DCYF to take the prints, send them to your vendor and to you, and that piece could be sort of like the first step in the approval process. It's part of a larger approval process, but you could get the fingerprint check done in the 24 to 48 hours you're talking about that it takes, but do it on day 1 or day 2 and not on day 20 or day 25. Does that make any sense? And is that not feasible for some reason? Because the school districts certainly have the capacity to make that happen right up front really quickly in their system. And they're part of the state government, obviously.
So it does make sense. We did talk to the school district. They do connect with the state patrol system directly, and they do have live scan machines when they would be just like the vendor. So essentially, when they do the fingerprints, everything must go to the state patrol. And part of the issue is that if you go to a local law enforcement, they don't have a purpose to send your fingerprints electronically to the state patrol, because then the state patrol doesn't know what is it they're doing it for. Are they doing it for childcare? Is it for foster care? Is it for adult and aging? So there has to be, everybody is given a unique identifier, or what's called an OCA number. And that's what's on the fingerprint appointment form. So all of that comes with the application because it has all your demographics. It's more of a systems thing, and it's more boring than probably this patience of this group has. And I understand that, but it's more than just the going and doing the fingerprints. But once you do the fingerprints, which seems to be the biggest barrier right here, if you go back and look at the processes, when we eliminate in the next slides that we probably won't get to, but in the next slides, we would, it would end up being where the fees are eliminated to where as soon as you submit your application, you're given the fingerprint appointment form almost immediately. And then it's just a matter of how fast and how available you can get the fingerprint appointment or the actual appointment.
So could those agreements be with local government I get your point that you've got to get that unique number so you know who you are and you're getting into the right system. But now it's like you got to go to this vendor, and then you're talking about a week to 2 weeks. Is it possible to have additional places like the school districts that would agree to do this for a fee, perhaps even, that then you can have it again the day you get your card, you can go right to your school district and have it done there?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think it's a great concept, and it's something that's been brought up and we've looked at it before. Can you have multiple vendors connected and all have access to this OCA number and that activates that number, but then knowing that only one place is going to be the chosen person where they go and they fingerprint? So in other words, can DSHS's system can they have more than one fingerprint vendor? And right now we were told no. So part of the background check work group and what we're going to be presenting to legislation is how can we look at this from an enterprise, a statewide solution? It's not just a childcare industry, it's foster care, it's adult and aging, it's anything who has to background check for anything in the state. We do too many background checks on people for, I mean, you could be taking care of your grandparent or your own parent, and then also want to do childcare and also maybe want to adopt a child. That's 3 different fingerprint checks. And that just doesn't make sense. So I think that there's things that they're looking at from a statewide or an enterprise, solution for all of this, not just for here, but obviously it would impact and it would benefit the childcare community as well. And that's what the legislation is asking for in a feasibility study and a background check work group that we have to present to them by July or June of 2023.
I respect that. We need to fix this now. We need to get more vendor. We need to have a possibility of being at the ESDs or the K-12 system. We can't wait for a feasibility. I mean, that's very bureaucratic answer, which I was supportive of that proviso. I was supportive of that work being done. But in the meantime, we've got a July 1st deadline, and people cannot get background checks done because your company that you've hired is closing places and people have to travel 168 miles to get to a place. So that needs to actually be fixed like today, not later.
I'm wondering, in the meantime, if we want to solve our own problem, are there approved background check vendors that we might even be willing to pay for? Because the problem here is that we don't want to have to close classrooms and our businesses and our programs. And the way the system is right now, there is no solution. So are there approved other vendors that we could use in the meantime to solve this problem? Because I don't think you're understanding the level of desperation that we are in as a consequence of this rule change. We want to keep kids safe. We want our staff background checked. That is not the issue. And if DCYF's system is the problem, we should have options available to us so we can solve our own problems since you are unable to solve it in a timely manner.
It's a system solution. And so there's no IT fix that's going to be able to be done in the next year. Just the way that the IT systems are, and it would take an IT solution in order to have more than one vendor. One of the solutions that is possible is that if we can get more persons.
But I don't mean a vendor that you guys contract with, because I know that's a big process.
Yeah.
We know there are background check companies out there. It seems to me that you guys should be able to identify 3 vendors that you approve of their system so that we can get this done. And then we could upload the background checks, the cleared things to your, because it's worth it to me to spend the money to do that and pay for it than to expect staff to drive long distances or to lose staff because they have to wait for too long or to close classrooms because we can't staff it for all of these reasons. I'm trying to find a different solution while you guys figure out your IT stuff or whatever. What other options can we do that is approved by your whatever? And if you don't have any, maybe you should identify some while you solve this problem.
Yeah, we have to be the ones that receive the results directly from the State Patrol and the FBI or an authorized entity. And so if you had another contracted vendor, they would have to hook up to our system in order for us to receive it. So we just can't receive a fingerprint rap sheet from you or the individual directly. That's why we have to.
Chris, on that part is, so why do they have to go to DCYF? Because it's been explained to me before that what a DCYF staff member does then is gets the report and compares it to a list of qualifying, disqualifying, whichever version of crimes. And then that's how you know that that part has been cleared. I am completely capable of doing that, as is every other provider on this call. We deal with so many things all day, every day. We have navigated an entire pandemic and still have standing businesses, no thanks to just about anyone else. And I don't understand why your staff are the only ones who are qualified to compare to lists. I can take a list and see. And if there are crimes that are in some gray area or something like that, then no, I'm not going to have that person on site until they have the full clearance. I have liability and obligations to our families and the children as well. Like, these are the kinds of barriers that are being put in place that make it impossible for us to do what we want to do. All we're asking for is quick, timely background checks, and other states do it. And you guys have known for far too long that this problem was coming. Sorry that we're loud about it today and that you don't like hearing that, but this has been a problem for far too long. And almost no action has been taken to actually fix it and actually make things happen. Thanks to the legislature for the money and that speeding up the process a little bit, but we cannot compete and get employees right now in this market. Like, I really do not think that anybody is understanding how grave this is going to be for our industry in July. And so I guess my point, sorry that I went on a whole big rampage there, but is why can we not get the report and compare it to a list? I have that skill set.
Because, well, we're the state agent, we're the agency identified in the CCDF plan that does that we're the lead agency that has to do and receive that information and make the determination.
So who do we have to get to remove that?
So every state has to have a lead agency designated to be in charge of administering the CCDF grants. And DCYF is the one designated in law for Washington state. And so I like the creative thinking and I don't mind hearing it. I just want to say that I would very much doubt that the feds would approve a state allowing providers to be the ones who make a determination on a background check. Not that I'm not willing to ask about that. I totally am.
Well, could you receive a digital file from another vendor then? I mean, like, I just feel like there's other solutions. Like, I'm also concerned about employee issues with regard to privacy, and confidentiality of, background checks and that type of thing. So, but it seems like we should be exploring, since the system is the problem, let's go find another vendor that we, 3 choices, whatever, that we could. I don't know what the answer is. I'm just saying we have to solve this problem. You guys don't have to live with it. We do. We have to face the parents. We have to tell staff, gee, sorry, we can't pay you until your clearance comes through, and then they go find another job somewhere else, and then we're back at square zero when it probably took us 6 months to get that person in the door and hired. There are no words to describe how dire the situation really is.
Matt or Chris, is it possible to, even at least for a portion of it, this does not even a little bit solve the whole issue, but is it possible to go to a contracted payment system so that you don't have places like Yakima just dependent on, hey, they stay if they can fill their full appointment schedule? Like, is it possible to pay them you get this fee whether you have the 400 appointments or not, so they actually stay there as one alleviation point?
That might be more of a Chris question, unless I'm just not seeing how that connects to the CCDF requirement.
Yeah, so Identigo and Field Print and fingerprint services just like that, they don't just do fingerprints for DCYF or DSHS, they do it for anybody. And then they have to have, and then that OCA number determines which agency is requesting on that behalf, and then who ends up getting that results when they come back. So yes, while I understand that their business model may determine whether they keep a place open or not, those 500 appointments, like for Yakima, the availability is not just for DCYF. And I don't think it would be in DCYF's best interest to pay for everybody else's appointments, other agencies, just to be able for them to keep their lights on. That's why we end up having a contract, and we are working and we are going to enforce the contract. Unfortunately, I guess if a contract terms are not met, then that's a breach of contract, and then we can end up probably terminating it, and then we're right back where we were trying to find another solution. So I do see this as the biggest pain point. What I'm trying to do is make it as smooth as possible and as fast as possible with everything else. My staff are processing things within the same hour. If an application comes in, it's going out within the same hour. And if the fee is eliminated, then the applicant can go and schedule their fingerprint probably within realistically 2 hours of submitting their application. And then depending on when they go and get their fingerprint done, we're getting those results back in 2 days and issuing them the same day. So that's why I really want to see and hear about folks that are experiencing with a name of the applicant, so I can trace and tell you exactly where in the system and the process that is being held up. And that's going to help us too.
You need a name and birth date, or just the name only?
A date of birth helps because.
Okay, that's what I thought. I'm giving you my names and birth dates.
Thank you for doing that. And go ahead.
Yeah, I appreciate that you'll do that. But at the same time, most providers in the state are not here today. They're not on the call. They wouldn't know. And this is a problem for everyone across the state. And I'm wondering if you guys, I don't know which one of you would need to address it, but the question about OSPI. We heard that fingerprints were done at a school district up north somewhere. I think it was Arlington, and they also needed to have a certain staff person get an early learning clearance as well, and that DCYF was able to somehow utilize the OSPI fingerprints that had already been done. And that's great, but why can't we all use OSPI's system? Have they been asked? Is it would it take legislation to get them to help us out in that way? What's the barrier to using OSPI?
I do think the short answer would be, I do think it would be a legislative lift. I do see there a benefit in partnering with OSPI. The reason why we can't use OSPI's results is because those fingerprints don't come into our system. They also aren't required to do the amount of background check components or elements on the CCDS side that we have to. That's why they accept our clearance, but we can't accept theirs.
Yeah, and that's a problem, that there's a double standard there. And I don't know what kind of legislation needs to happen, but I'm not comfortable with the fact that our public school teachers are not required to do the same depth of clearance that our childcare teachers are. And I can't help but wonder if there's some systemic issues related to, the fact that not over 90% or nearly 90% of our public school teachers are not BIPOC. And what's behind all that? I mean, I hate to talk conspiracy theories, but it's like, what in the heck is going on where all the kids don't get the same protection? And then when we want to provide care to families who need it, the very entity that's supposed to be helping us is putting up the barriers to us doing that.
Is it a willingness by OSPI to coordinate with early learning providers? Is that the barrier? Or is there some other barrier that I'm not understanding?
It's a system issue.
What would it take to fix that?
It would take updating our background check system to be able to accept the fingerprints from OSPI.
Is it a money thing?
I don't know necessarily a money as much as it's a coding thing. We were working on updating our background check system for a couple of years when we knew this, and then actually with the COVID, we thought we would buy some time, but we actually had a programmer position posted, and I think it was posted for almost 2 years before we could hire somebody. So we're also finding difficulty to find resources in the IT world competitively for DCYF to hire, and that's been an issue as well.
That means you're not paying enough.
I don't disagree with you. It's hard to compete against Microsoft and some of the other companies.
It is, but you guys do have a dump of money from the federal government that could be used to hire. Again, it's like, that's not our problem. You guys have all the money. We're the ones begging for the money. I see here that you are protective of your process and you've streamlined your process as best you can, but we still have the problem that we don't have locations where people can get their fingerprinting done that are close by enough for it to be done. So you might be able to make an appointment in 24 hours, but someone just wrote in the thing that in Yakima, we always have to wait a week before an appointment to get a fingerprinted by the vendor. That now no longer exists there. And also, in order to schedule somebody off to get them out of the building and to a place where you have to drive 100 and whatever amount of miles, you have to plan for that. They have to plan for that with their own families in order to be missing from work. It means they may not be paid to get that fingerprinting done.
They need the gas money.
Right. And so there are a lot of barriers to being able to just get it done. You can schedule it. All right, great. But how does that work for the individual who has to make the time to drive that far, to be out of work, to not be able to care for their own families in that time frame? And so we would like DCYF, we would like you guys to fix that. Either get these folks that are doing fingerprints for other industries to include us in their fingerprinting and to stand up these programs faster, or to figure something else out. The ESDs will help us, the OSPIs will help us, there are districts will help us. Everyone's standing up and saying, we're here, we'll do it. And then there's the that can't be done, but it has to be done. We've got to get people fingerprinted more quickly than being able to have to drive 3 hours or even an hour. It's too much time. They need to be able to go down the street, get their fingerprints like they are in Virginia, at a, FedEx or whatever, and then get the process moving. I understand your process is fine, but that part of the process isn't fine.
And what if they don't have a car? What if they don't have a car?
Yeah,
I mean,
it requires
really?
a car. I know. Like
So
the presumption that we can do that is ridiculous.
And I just
Okay.
want to, really quick, Michelle has had her hand up. Sorry if I'm saying your name wrong, but she's had her hand up for quite a long time. So I just wanted to acknowledge that she has a question. And then I noticed Gloria has her hand up next.
Thank you. Again, Michelle from Creative Kids. Chris, if I understood it right, so one of the solutions is that we as providers can have the state provide, train the fingerprinting process. How long does that take to get, I'm telling you right now, bring it on. How do I do it? How do I sign up? I don't want to close classrooms. I'm gonna need to hire staff. So those of us who don't have the access to a fingerprinting location closer than an hour away, again, for me, specifically in my town, it's a total of 3 hours at the minimum. How do I do that? And can I do it before, can I get certified so that I can start running it before July 1st when this is supposed to be implemented? Because I see that as a solution, at least. Now, I'm not committing, just to make it clear, to do everybody in Kittitas County. I'm an owner of 2 centers and a director of 1, and I do not have time to have everybody come and maybe the fingerprinting location. So just to clarify, this would be for my center, because it sounds like that's the only solution currently that DCYF is offering for those of us that don't have a fingerprinting center currently in our town or anywhere within the 30-mile radius. Otherwise, we need to go to whoever we need to go to, whether that's the governor, whether that's the head of the DCYF. For those of us that are in counties like Kittitas and Yakima, there needs to be some kind of waiver. And until you guys figure out the 30-mile radius, we need an exemption to not be included in that, because it's just not, it's not fair. It's not right to make us close our business, to make us, we're the face of the parents, to have us be the ones that could potentially put these kids at harm's way because DCYF is saying this needs to be done without the solution. So, and I don't want to come at anybody. I think it's great, the turnaround that you guys are saying it's faster, that's great. But we need something for our county and Yakima County now, not it's coming. If it is coming, then we need a waiver, or we need a some sort of extension to the exemption.
So I'm going to have Carrie, she's going to look and try to provide that information in the chat, and then we'll also want to follow up, and maybe with Deanna and Emily, we can make sure we get that out to you. There is a catch to becoming a site, because what you're doing is you're becoming a subcontractor for IDEMIA or Identico. And so they will provide you with the live scan equipment, the fingerprint capturing equipment, the training, and then the fee, because there is a fee. I think that right now it's like, I'm just going to say $11. I think that DCYF pays, or the applicant pays $11, and you would get probably $6 of that. I'm just throwing that out there. So it wouldn't be that you would do it for free. You would get all the training and the equipment, and plus maybe get a small amount. But then what that does is that puts you on their list of sites to fingerprint their applicants, which again is not just DCYF. It could be DSHS, it could be Adult Protective Services, it could be Horse Racing Commission. I mean, it could be whoever needs to do a fingerprint check.
And to play that same game, could I just not make appointments available and only do it to my own center? I mean, if I
hear what you're saying. Yeah, I think it's worthwhile. Take the information and contact them, because it's, we're just giving you the information, and then you can reach out to them and you can ask those questions as well.
Okay, Chris. Okay. We were invited to this subgroup committee to express our needs like providers, to express our concerns, and you want to hear from us what we need to be supported And right now we presenting concerns, we presenting what is not working for us, and we asking about support. I believe from the another side on your department, do you going to take action to help us to solve this issue, to solve this problem? Because when it's a problem, we find solutions. We don't put excuses. We don't justify us. Only we're going to take action and find solutions. I understood that's why we were invited to come to this meeting. In your side, I believe you can advocate for us to have better the system. We need to be supported. We want to feel like we are listening, and this time like we spending in here is worth it. I don't want like something happen. We have this meeting, take notes and put those notes in the file cabinet and close the file cabinet. And we have a meeting with providers and that's it. And nothing happened. We expecting, in my personal side, I believe that all the providers around here, we expecting solutions, positive solutions, to be accountable, to be part of the system with you guys, because we go working in collaboration. We are the ones who are living. We are using the system, and that system is not working, and that's why we're asking for help. And that is why is the only one thing I want to say. We need support, take action, help us, and we don't going to bother, because we are the ones who daily suffering these kind of struggles, and we are the ones who express what we like, how we like the things to be done, because we are the ones who we are using it. And sometimes legislators and people who don't have nothing to do with our programs making decisions for us, and that is not okay. We are the ones who are using that. We have the ones who is going to express and make decisions. That's it. Thank you.
Yeah, I can appreciate that. And I always like to try to cut to the chase. We have been working with DSHS to see if we can't get their system to be improved. We look to see if separating out the fingerprints would actually be, if it's an option, but then also when we found out just, what the time difference was, we are working on our vendor. Again, we don't have this contract updated yet, and we're DSHS's contract. We're piggybacking on that one, but we do have a separate contract. So DSHS has already established that IDEMIA will have sites within 30 miles from the person's place of business or the residence. That is exactly what we're putting into our contract, and they've agreed to that. And then we are finalizing that, so it will also be similar on July 1. With the increase in processes and being able to eliminate the fees to reduce that, we've shaved off probably 30–40% of the time, the turnaround time. And again, I don't know until July 1 comes that we can be able to see, and I already have with our IT folks, data points to be set up every 3 to 4 months, so we can find out things like average time from when it was the applicant scheduled the appointment to when they went to the fingerprint appointment. I mean, we're going to get every data point out there, so we can pinpoint where is it. Is it with the vendor? Is it with us, DCYF? Is it the time it takes us to receive the results from DSHS? Is it State Patrol? And again, State Patrol and the FBI, how long are we seeing the difference between the results coming back to DSHS? Should we revisit that?
I don't think we have time to evaluate the research from July 1st forward when we're mandated to implement this. This should have been done before the mandate, because when you don't even have fingerprint checks 5 weeks before, we don't have time for that. This should have already occurred before July 1st.
I get that, but again, we can only assume what is going to happen come July 1st. And if we're eliminating the payment, which took up to 5 days, and we know that the system automatically, upon submitting the background check, we don't have to wait for the payment anymore. So once you submit the background check, you should automatically be getting the fingerprint appointment form. So that should really be 1 day instead of 5. And then we need to, working with the vendor, making sure that they stand up on July 1, that they have sites within 30 days. And then hopefully the capacity is there, and we won't know until July 1st, but the capacity is there for them to be able to do those fingerprints timely. Then we should be able to see the fingerprint appointments go down in the length of time it takes. And then we know that it takes up to 2 days, 1 to 2 days to get the results back for persons who don't have history, which is the majority of folks. And if we're issuing decisions within the same day, then just my rough math, you could possibly look at a 5-day turnaround time for a background check. Now,
That's not the reality at all. You never
No.
call for an appointment and get it the next day. It that is not what happens. That's ridiculous.
But that's what you're asking, and that's what we're asking of the vendor. So again, we're working on this contract. That's what our expectation is going to be, is that they have availability and it's going to be within a distance that is reasonable.
But also by July 1st, we're going to have a delay here of being able to hire people. This actually has to happen now because we're trying to get people up to speed by July. We need our staff on. We can't wait till July 1st to have all of this done. But I will come back and thank the Lucky Stars. I will thank you personally if anybody gets an appointment within 1 day of asking for one. I mean, that just doesn't happen. It doesn't happen on the best day. And never mind that we don't have places for people to get their fingerprinting in. That just seems, I'm sorry, it just seems really far-fetched. It seems like a good answer for people who are upset about fingerprinting and are complaining to legislators, and legislators want to hear that DCYF has this under control, but that is not what we are experiencing.
No, I don't want it to be under control. I don't want the system to collapse, but I am with you and looking forward to the background check work group to advocate for all these pain points and barriers that I've seen firsthand.
The childcare system is on the verge of collapse because we can't hire people. And this is only going to add to that serious risk. It is not a joke, and it's not hyperbole. It is the reality we're living in. So, I mean, there isn't time.
I'm curious, the definition of collapse. I mean, if we use the word crisis or whatever, like it's already, we have less teachers, we have less providers. I know of countless programs or classrooms in Spokane that are closed early hours or closed entirely because they cannot find teachers now. And this is when they don't have to have them have a background check to be alone with kids. So we currently are in a situation where we have closed classrooms or parents having to leave work early because their childcare can't stay open. So we're currently collapsing. So because the collapse has been so gradual, if you will, there's not going to be one marker in time to show us and prove that we could have done better. We know that it's here. It's been here. It's like we're being boiled slowly. There's no marker.
Are they under contract now? And do they have a certain mile radius they're supposed to adhere to and to go?
Yes, they're under contract now, and it's a 50-mile radius.
Well, they're not meeting that. Plain and simple, they're not. So for you to think on July 1st it's going to be met is insane. They're not meeting it now. And another barrier we have is just not the prints. When staff are trying to sign up and they have an old Merit account, it takes us a week to get back, to get a hold of Merit, to get an account open, to even start the application. We need to be able to have someone, if background checks are filtered through Merit, that someone can call and they can talk to somebody right now to get their Merit account squared away so that they can start the application process.
So I'm going to make a note of that so that way we can have our merit team aware of that so they can work on their capacity as well.
Thank you.
Should we go through the next slides at all? Do you want to see about the fees? I guess you see that there. And then also, does everybody know about the background check work group? The funding in the legislature to stand up a work group of at least representatives from the Department of Corrections, the Washington
I
State.
think many of us are aware of it, but we know that it's going to be a year before the recommendations from that group go into effect, and that doesn't even put solutions into effect necessarily, and we're up against this deadline. I just want to ask one more. You know, the name of the department, DCYF, Department of Children, Youth and Families, it's really concerning. This lack of solution will leave all of these children without childcare. I mean, well, they might find somebody, a neighbor or somebody down the road, somebody that decided to do a pop-up, right? But the focus on children doesn't seem to be there when we can't get a turnaround on a background check in a timely enough fashion that we're able to employ people.
Because that's 19 days is what you're telling us, and that's too much. And that's if you can even get the prints done.
Is 19 days and is that work days or calendar days, Chris?
So 19 days was calendar days, and that was pre-COVID when you could work supervised or you could work after submitting the application. So that's what we're saying. And the point of saying that was that when I hear it's taking 2 or 3 months, I need to find out who those individuals are so I can find out where in the system it's failing.
Well,
so that's why I'm asking
to be
for
frank,
that.
19 days is still far too long if they cannot even be on site to begin training. That's ridiculous. So does that mean that you can't even interview somebody on site? This is insane.
Can that question be answered as to what they can do or cannot do on site?
Matt, do you want to answer that question?
I'm sorry, could you restate the question? I'm not sure I understand.
She said that 19 days is too long. And that, does that mean that 19 days before they can even be interviewed? What can they and can they not do?
So CCDF says that a person can't begin work. So, you know, I would think you can do job interviews, but they can't be an employee until they've got clearance on element.
I was being
I'm not being facetious. I mean,
really?
I mean, I want to know, can they sit down and watch the training film? I want to know, what can they do? Is that because see, the L&I says training is not work. So can they be trained? That's not considered work. So what is your definition of work?
Let me look into the CCDF rules and see what they say about that, or if we can get some guidance on that.
Yeah, because L&I does not consider training work. It's called training.
So I just want to jump in really quick. I know there's been a lot of Q&A, and I know we only have like 28 minutes left, and we still want to get to addressing the emergency recommendation piece, that draft. And so I want to ask if now is a good time. We've captured, obviously, all of the recommendations that we've been hearing throughout this whole conversation. So we do have a document that we want to share with you. So we would pop into a breakout room and kind of walk through that with everyone. Is this a good time to do that? Or does anyone have any other questions that they want to talk about or ask prior to doing that? Thumbs up, Julie. Anyone else thumbs up? Thumbs up, Michelle. Okay. All right, so I'm seeing multiple thumbs up. Okay, so we will do that. Is that okay with you both, Matt and Chris? Right, okay, cool. Okay, and then we do still have some questions in the chat. Don't worry, we will definitely, we've been tracking all of it. So if there aren't any answers to some of these, we will try to get responses to those, like we've said before, in our feedback loop documents. But we do have a document we want to share. And so I know that we have some, a breakout room set aside. So we will pop into that. I know Emily is going to pop some of you into that breakout room so we can look at that recommendation list. So you're going to get an opportunity to join here in a minute.
that. Matt. Oh, muted. Hey, Matt. Sorry about leaving you in there for so long. We just we're continuing with the recommendations.
Oh, that's totally fine. I just
But yeah,
be unavailable if I was needed.
we are going to close the meeting out for today. Thank you, everybody.